Hello, welcome to Beyond the Numbers. One prayer that every Ghanaian patriotically prays every day is God bless our homeland Ghana and make our nation great and strong. And to it, we have to ensure that the blessing that has been bestowed on the nation, gold, cocoa, and other minerals are managed prudently to ensure we benefit, to ensure it's spread across countries, to ensure every policy and project that are critical for national development are implemented. And one conversation we're going to be having this afternoon here on Beyond the Numbers is whether we are sacrificing cocoa for gold. I am Winston Tack, and I'm doing this show with
Isaac Ofeja, as always.
Well,
so Winston asked an important question, whether we are sacrificing cocoa for gold. And the reason why we need to have this conversation is that just this week, there was a report by Reuters, and the report was that Ecuador was on course to actually replace Ghana as the second largest producer of cocoa globally. And this is something new that's not coming out. I mean, somewhere 2 years ago, we saw a similar news, and this year we are seeing another one. So what we are analyzing is asking that very simple question: are we, as a country, substituting, cocoa for gold? Because we've seen what is going on in terms of the numbers, and that's what we are going to analyze here on the show. But so far, one thing we have realized is that if you look at the Reuters report, one thing you see is that there was that projection for 2025, which was that West Africa as a whole was going to suffer some 10% drop in cocoa output for 2025. And when you're talking about West Africa cocoa, you definitely will consider Ghana and Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast is still able to produce about 1 million metric tons. We haven't been able to reach 600,000 metric tons last season. And we are hoping to possibly get that this season and maybe still maintain our position. But based on this projection that we are getting, the simple question is, are we sacrificing cocoa for gold, Caleb?
Well, I think so. The drop from second to possibly the third largest cocoa producer in the world is mainly because of the farm gate price. Now, in these other countries, the South African countries, whenever farmers go to sell their cocoa, they get almost all the world market price. So currently hovering around $7,000, $5,000 per ton, or per ton. So these farmers can maximize their output. When they go to the world markets and they get the maximum price for their cocoa, they can go to their farms, buy the machinery, buy the needed chemicals and fertilizers and everything to maximize their output. So if you look at output produced in these South African countries and even some African countries, they have a smaller hectare share for their cocoa produce, but they have maximum output. So for a small cocoa farm, they can produce more because they are utilizing technology. Ghana, on the other hand, it's not like that, because most of our cocoa farms are, family-owned cocoa farms, and then the money we get from selling the cocoa is not enough to, cover costs and then reinvest it in the farm. And then the recent farm gate price was increased by just 4% in CD terms, and about 128 CDs per bag or 2,000 per ton. So, it's not enough for farmers to say, okay, I'm getting more now, I can reinvest in my farm, considering the cost of living, inflation, the CD depreciation, everything that's going on in the economy. You cannot reinvest your funds into your farm. But then with the other South American countries, they can do this, which is why Ecuador, if you see the graph, we'll get to the graph shortly, Ecuador has been rising steadily while Ghana has been declining. And also and the major factor of why cocoa prices are high at this time is because of, outputs. Ghana and Ivory Coast, we are losing some cocoa outputs every year because of the weather, illegal mining, which we'll get into later, and so many other factors. So these things are contributing to shortfall in the global markets. When there's shortfall, price goes up. And even though when price goes up, we are supposed to benefit, the farmers don't benefit from these high prices, and they can't reinvest in their farms. But then the other smaller cocoa producing countries can't do that, which is why they are producing more and more by the day.
Talking about prices, we looked at the farm gate price and how much even comes to the farmer. One thing, the disparity or the variance we are seeing in the South American countries is that whilst in Ecuador, a farmer can get about 90% of the world market price, in our country, we celebrated 70% this year. Even looking at the next cocoa season, and many have said that was a big step because we were really below 70% of global, the world market price or the FOB price. But if you look at Ecuador, for instance, they give 90% of the price to farmers. Would you say that, I mean, we'll come to illegal mining and all of that, but would you say that over-regulation in our space is currently, affecting cocoa, production in Ghana?
I think Ecuador has been planning this structure for several years now, and it didn't just happen suddenly. You realize that there's been systematic steps to where they decide to go in the next planting season. That is, they've targeted 650,000 metric tons for the next cocoa season. We have targeted 600,000 metric tons. So the differential tells you that it's likely in terms of projection, they will overtake us. One thing that Ecuador has done successfully is tracing. In 2025 is one thing the Cocoa Board are also planning to do due to the new European Union regulation on how we export to the European market. And that advantage that Ecuador has right now is because they have ensured that farmers are quite comfortable and their system of tracing is easy. So cocoa traced from EU market can now be accessible from Ecuador compared to Ghana. Right now, the whole tag of whether the quality of cocoa, which we've consistently been saying that we have the best quality in terms of grain on the market, and therefore we have chocolate factories globally buying our cocoa. They buy ahead of time because they know they don't need to spend extra.
Yeah, we have premium, right?
Exactly, premium quality, and that is our selling point. So far, we are losing that selling point, not because we couldn't meet some demand, but because we failed to safeguard that particular niche for quite some time now. Other countries have realized that potentially cocoa has grown by over 70% in the last season, from 3,000 to now about 10,000 international markets. Tells you that farmers have realized that it's a really cash crop that they can prioritize. Countries are now strategizing, saying that although Ghana is doing this, Cote d'Ivoire are also doing this, cocoa is one cash crop that needs the scientifically proven environment to germinate. And if you could create that particular conditions for it as a country, irrespective of whether you are not good in it, you are likely to hit certain dimensions and get more revenue from it. So where we are going as a country, Ghana, we have a lot of work to do. You mentioned overregulation. Cocoa Board, as an institution, came in because of key challenges that farmers faced several years back. Cocoa Board did its part, but it appeared that particular benefit that was supposed to leak down to the farmers became a key challenge. So Cocoa Board was ensuring that there were implementation of key government policies. But over time, it became too overregulated, too politicized, and it got to a point where farmers are not really receiving those fertilizers that are supposed to reach them farmers on time. And most of the time, farmers are shortchanged in terms of scaling of skills, because when they go to certain warehouses, the scaling became a key challenge. They were questioning the type of scales that were used to measure the cocoa. So there were a lot of challenges that came by over the years. But Ghana so far should have been the best in the industry. Cocoa Board has its own challenges already. Over responsibility. Cocoa Board is doing so much, but so little to show. When we talk about how they manage the finances in the sector, the overborrowing in the sector, that is one fear many are quite skeptical that the Gold Board may also not lead to, because they have now become the agent between the source and the market. And that is literally what Cocoa Board is doing.
Well, let's look at the inflows that, I mean, this is a very good number, although if it, relative to what we had last year, it's a very good improvement where we are getting about $2.5 billion from cocoa export. But if you compare it to gold, right? And that's why we're asking that simple question, if we are substituting cocoa for gold. 11.2 billion in the first 8 months of 2025 compared to 2.5 billion. Is that in itself possibly compelling government to Ghana to look at the direction of gold more than cocoa? Because you see the price of gold, for instance, it's been rising. It doesn't look like it's going to fall anytime soon. Close to about $3,800 per ounce, right? And that's very, very significant. If you see this graph, Does that bring to you some form of worry going forward in the future, where you may have certain cocoa farmers saying that, well, I get a lot from, I may get some, a lot from gold, so why don't I sell my cocoa farm to, gold miners?
That's already happening. We have some cocoa farmers
selling
their farms to illegal miners, and some legal small-scale miners to convert to gold mines, and then they benefit from that. So that's already happening. But then the thing is that gold prices, so for you to increase your cocoa output, you need more cocoa farms, you need more cocoa seedlings and all of that. And that takes time. So if we are not
a lot of investments.
Exactly. If we are not deliberate about policy and improving the cocoa sector, this is what we see. Because with small-scale mining or galamsey or even large-scale mining, you can go to the mine today, in a few months, you get gold. Small-scale miners, they can even go to the farm by the weekend, they have their gold, because they don't have to go through the regulations and all of that. But then with cocoa, if I want to start a cocoa farm today, it's going to take a long time. Unless I go and buy a cocoa farm from someone, or I go and buy cocoa tree, it's a long process. But then for gold, it's easier to get. And also because of gold prices, currently $3,700 per ounce. This is the highest gold has ever been, like in forever.
Yeah.
So this is what's compelling people to go into mining. And then when some illegal miners approach cocoa farmers, and also because cocoa farmers don't believe that they are getting what they should get.
Exactly, and it's clear.
If you compare that to the global price, how much farmers are getting in other countries like Ecuador, even Cameroon, cocoa farmers are complaining. And if you look at the exchange rate that cocoa boards set for farmers, that's about 10 cedis, 25 pesos. Currently, the exchange rate is about 11 cedis, 12 cedis, thereabouts. So farmers feel like they are not getting what they need to get for their cocoa. And if they cannot get enough to cover their needs, cover the needs of their family, and then reinvest in the farm, we're not going to see increased output just like that, because it's not going to happen. And then once gold prices are all-time highs and you can get gold easier and you can sell it to illegal miners or whoever, we are going to see a lot more of cocoa farmers selling their farms in the future.
On top of that, one thing we are also tracking is the fact that the futures, cocoa futures are falling, and they are falling faster even in the London market than in New York. This is the New York markets, for instance. You can see cocoa prices dropping. It went as high as $12,000 per ton. Right now, dropping. Even in the London market, very, very significant. And as you can see, it's a very, very steep in terms of the drop. So whilst you're having gold prices going up and a lot of people going into mining, the picture doesn't really look good for cocoa, especially Ghana, because we have a peculiar challenge where we've had a number of cocoa farms being turned into, galamsey sites and illegal mining sites and all of that. And another big question on smuggling, which will show you the numbers very soon. But on average, we are losing about 200,000 metric tons to just smuggling. And that in itself, if you add it to our official numbers, could have afforded us some, 800,000, 900,000 metric tons a year. And that could have possibly brought in a lot of syndicated loan that would have definitely, helped the city to stabilize. One thing we are seeing is that cocoa prices are falling. Do you think that this is another big worry, and this can also take a lot from us, looking at the projections we did for this year, and the fact that farmers don't even believe that they are getting the maximum, outturn?
Mostly when you look at projections, farmers are mostly taken out of the dynamics, and that is a key concern. So only countries that have prioritized farmer incentives are seeing a boost in their output. Ecuador have done that, and we are seeing that happening. When we talk about these numbers that you're seeing on the screen with the outlook coming down, it appears a lot of the chocolate manufacturing companies have decided to do future purchases now because they are not quite optimistic about the outlook and the meeting of the demand. Previously, we targeted 350,000 metric tons. That was last season. We couldn't even meet half of it, and that brought some kind of negative optimism on the global outlook. One thing that Ghana has failed to do over the years, Côte d'Ivoire has been covering up due to global demands. Anytime they oversupply, although we don't meet the demand, when you look at the West African sub-region, Côte d'Ivoire seems to be covering Ghana. South Africa came through shortly, briefly, but it appears that now we are being exposed because it appears our finances as a country in terms of meeting investors, bringing them in to say, yes, this is what we have. How much are you going to put out for that? Until recently, where the Cocoa Board CEO, Cocoa Board Randy Abe, came out to state that he was signing some contract and agreement with some key buyers, and they were quite optimistic that indeed they can meet the market. But the market is also observing whether the challenges of cocoa, the virus, swelling shoots, all of them are key factors that are affecting the outlook. In Côte d'Ivoire, it is a key concern for them now. They have been forced to bring down their target for the next season. And this, most manufacturing companies are meaning that they have to cut down investment and diversify their portfolio, because business is not business as usual. Usually there used to be a lot of biscuits and chocolate products on the market. Gradually, they are replacing it with different variety of sweetness in terms of chips, biscuits, and this should tell you that now chocolate is not as easy to have access to now. And if we are not careful as a country, we don't position ourselves rightly by ensuring the initial remuneration to the farmers adhere to. And traceability, the EU concern is a very, very disturbing one. The European Union is the biggest buyer of cocoa in the West African sub-region. And if we are not to abide by their strict regulation, last year I was at a meeting when a researcher kept voicing that Ghana, we need to ensure our traceability. Our cocoa farmers are not child labor incentivized, where we don't see children on our farms. Our cocoa products, when they check the element and the content of it, does not have elements of any chemical that are as a result of illegal mining that have come there.
That's a key challenge, because the recent research by the EPA and POET, it saw that they had mercury, arsenic, and lead.
Yes, and these are key concerns because these products, when they get to the international market, are tested.
Exactly.
And they have to go through the Food and Drug Authority in those various regions, because they need to assess the quality of product that enters the market. So with these strict regulations in terms of export, we are likely to lose hugely, and this will subsequently affect our GDP and revenue inflow. Cocoa have been the backbone of Ghana's economy. It's not time for us to sacrifice it, because we can have sustainable cocoa farming, but when you talk about going sustainable mining, it will take several years because we don't have the expertise in that dimension.
Now, Winston made an important point, which is sacrificing, the sacrifice we are doing at the moment, where it looks like West Africa doesn't look like the future, because I have seen the grinding data for the last quarter of 2025, and what you see is that less and less cocoa beans are now being turned into chocolate and other product, which means that manufacturers are now looking for alternatives, and that's driving down the price. And although you have, JP Morgan Global Research saying that they still believe that cocoa prices will still be around $6,000, US dollars per ton, it looks like what is keeping, manufacturers and traders, what is giving them the big hope is Ivory Coast and Ecuador, the story of Ivory Coast and Ecuador. And if you go into the data, what you see is that countries like Cameroon, Nigeria are even coming so close to Ghana in terms of annual production. So how do we look at this? Look at this chart on the smartphone. What you see is the fall in Ghana's cocoa output, where somewhere 2021 we're producing somewhere around 1 million metric tons, or 1 million tons of cocoa beans in one season. But now we've fallen below and still trying to possibly produce somewhere around 650,000 metric tons next season. And if we go below that and Ecuador is able to produce 600,000, they will definitely be number 2 globally. But Winston said an important thing that I think this graph explains, it, that Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa has been covering up for Ghana for a number of years. Just like Côte d'Ivoire in blue and Ghana in the deep blue. You see a big difference in terms of the production numbers. Big gap. And even if you decide to add Ecuador, which you were talking about, what you see is that Ecuador has been climbing up steadily, and they are now almost at par with Ghana. Look at the difference between Ecuador in red. The difference between us and Côte d'Ivoire, very huge. The difference between us and Ecuador used to be big, wide, in 2021, 2021, and then also if you go back as far back as 2016, 2017. But now see how close that gap has become. And the explanation is that Ecuador didn't just get here by chance. Just about 4 years of consistent investment and strategic, investment. In our case, do you see any strategic investment, and how do we even come back to the market and possibly, once upon a time where we were the largest producer in the world, are we even able to overtake Cote d'Ivoire, which seem to be producing and increasing the gap wide and wide almost every year?
Well, I think this chart tells the story.
Yeah.
You see that Ecuador, their production is private-led. So it's led by the farmer.
Yeah.
But the farmer goes to the market to get the price that they can get, which is almost higher than the amount farmers get in Ghana. They can reinvest and improve their output.
Yeah.
But with Ghana, we've left that to the government. Cocoa Board does that. Cocoa Board is supposed to do the investments, come up with the seedlings, come up with
fertilizers and all of that. Even roads.
But they've stopped the cocoa.
Yeah.
So to incentivize farmers to increase their yields. Now, we can see that Ecuador, which is private sector led, has been increasing since 2016. But Ghana, we've actually been reducing, come up a bit to 1 billion tons, and then it came down, we are climbing up a bit. So you can tell that when it's in the hands of a private, with the farmer, if the farmer has the tools, they can actually improve their output, because it depends on the farmer. If you don't improve your output, you get less. But then with Ghana, we know that Cocoa Board will give us, either way. So we can maintain our yields right now. If Cocoa Board comes up with some, financing or some investment here and there, they will take it. But then if it's with the farmer, if I know that, okay, I can put 50% of my profits into my farm and then get, yields twice, we can get yields more than twice that, then yes, I'm going to do that. But then with farmers in Ghana, that's a different case. So that's something that, is driving this,
I think I want to reiterate his point on the private led, and that is a very important aspect. If you look at the country's plan, if you go years back, you're reading how beneficial cocoa has been as the support of this economy. One strategy we had previously was the Ghana Cocoa Processing Company.
Yeah.
We were adding value to cocoa. That company came to buy. But if you look at the books of the company, the number of red flags in the books over the years, and how that company is still standing, most of their machines are outdated. Most of the plants are outdated. And if you go to the market, even the quality ones that they produce, most of them are not found in the local market. Only few you find in shelves. I'll not mention brands, but that is one thing you see. And that is a key concern. If we are able to add value to our cocoa and not just exporting the raw beans in its nature, we would have been making thrice more than we are making now. Why are we still where we are if we are not prioritizing policies and reinvesting in the quality of beans? Because if we are the premium, that means we have the source. And if we are the source, that means if we are able to add value at the source, will dominate the market. In Europe, Ghana's cocoa will be the most demanded in terms of finished products than just the raw beans. Because when it gets to the raw beans, they add values to it, they change it and add their key elements. Because every product has key component. If you look behind it, they tell you content, what is ingredient, how much percentage. All these are specifications that are being approved. But if we are to be the niche, and we've lost that to many countries because we've waited for too long. If you wait, competition will take you by, because we live in a very competitive market now. It
looks like Ivory Coast is far gone in terms of, and we always say that, Ghana and Ivory Coast combined produce about 60%. But if you break it down, our share of the global market is just about, currently it's around 13 or 14%.
China is even coming on board.
China is coming on board, Ecuador, and I made a point that Nigeria and Cameroon are all matching up, producing about 300 metric tons a year. But the big question is, and we need to answer that question, are we really substituting cocoa for gold? Because it looks like our attention now is on gold board and not cocoa board, right? And cocoa board in itself, it was supposed to be the backbone of the economy, but it looks like it is the SOE that is actually driving back the economy, right? I mean, pulling back the economy, because cocoa board's debts are rising. And I mean, an SOE that's supposed to bring in Forex for the country has to now save it. They've done DDEP and all of that. We are looking for private participation for ECG. Possibly, do you think that it's time for us to maybe look for private guys for, cocoa board, especially looking at the fact that Ecuador is giving us some good template to follow? Well,
I think for the cocoa sector to succeed, the farmer is you need to prioritize the farmer.
Yeah.
So we need more policies that are directed towards farmer maximization, farmer satisfaction, and then more policies that can allow the farmer to reinvest and have hope in the sector. Because if you speak to most cocoa farmers, they've lost hope. And also, most of them are just driving to illegal mining now. They sell their farm because if an illegal miner gives them...
on top of that,
the smuggling, exactly. So if an illegal miner gives them enough for, let's say, their cocoa sales in the next 5-10 years, they might be okay with it, even though that's short-sightedness, and also gold prices might come down again. So cocoa is more sustainable compared to gold because gold prices, come down, but cocoa, you can get more out of it. And then we are seeing more inflow from cocoa this year, not because we are producing more, but just because
prices are still high.
So that's a
well, Winston, Caleb made an important point. You have the last 30 seconds.
Basically, I think we are losing the grounds to that because if you look at the cocoa board is now the monopoly in terms of sales and monopoly in terms of distribution of fertilizers. We need private sectors to come through. I was at the World Bank report this morning, and one of the key indices was that cocoa board is controlling too many things. They should allow private sectors to play in because that has been the challenge that has been bringing the sector down for quite some time now. And I believe if we are not to sacrifice our cocoa lands, the farmers are also lamenting that they are losing their funds because they find the minerals within the grounds more profitable than the minerals on top, which is the cocoa. And that is a header we need to face.
Well, this has been the Beyond the Numbers with me, Isaac Kufeje, Winston Taki, and as always, Caleb Ziblin.